All right, so in Hebrews chapter 12. Whew. You have not come to a mountain with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no longer word would be spoken to them. So you see, they came to a mountain. When Moses went up on that mountain, they came to a mountain and the voice was so loud. And the voice was so majestic. And the voice was so, it scared them. It scared them that they didn't want to hear it. They just wanted Moses to hear it. They didn't want to be confronted to it because they came to this mountain and we're not going to that mountain. We're not going to a mountain where one person goes and experiences the presence of God. We're not going to a mountain like that. And it says, but, let's see. In verse 22 it says, well, actually in 21 it says, the sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. Moses was trembling with fear. Moses had stood in the presence of God at the burning bush. Moses had stood in the presence of God every time he talked to Pharaoh. Every time he took and started a plague in Pharaoh in Egypt, Moses had been in the presence of God. Every time Moses had prayed, Moses had been in the presence of God. And here he is, he's at the mountain, and the geologists have found the top of that mountain and the rocks are still burnt. They're still burnt by the fire that was there. And Moses looked at this sight and Moses heard the voice. And Moses said, I am trembling with fear. You see, we forget who we're dealing with sometimes. We get so arrogant. We get so arrogant, we forget the majesty of God. We forget the magnanimous awesomeness of God. And here's Moses who's used to God. He's used to the presence. He's used to talking to him. And he's trembling in fear. But you see, we're not coming there. We're not coming to that mountain. No, but you have come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. You see, that's where we're coming to. And you know, when the New Jerusalem comes down, it's going to come and it's going to be there. The temple is not going to be a physical temple. Jesus and the Father are going to be the temple. And the glory of God is going to be the light. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine this? I was just sitting there, I was just trembling, thinking about being in that depth of glory, being in that depth of God, that don't need the sun and the moon anymore because of the glory of God. You see, when the New Jerusalem comes down, and those whose names are written in the book of life, will live there. I remember, my uncle, he was a very prideful person. And he goes, I can't wait to get to heaven. I got a lot of questions to ask Jesus. It's like, wow. I said, I wonder if I'll be able to get off my face. I wonder if I'll be able to get up. Because I've been in the glory of God where I couldn't get up. I've been in the presence of God where I couldn't physically get up because it was so weighty. And it was my pride that kept me out of the presence of God. It was my pride thinking that I could just walk in. I could just walk into the presence of God. I could just walk in and just say, well, let the party begin. I have arrived, But there's so many people that come to God and they come to worship. They come to church you know, and they just treat it like it's just like going to the movie. They don't treat it like we're going to meet God, like we're going to meet the Almighty. And you see, we're coming to that. We're going to that place in the New Jerusalem, which is the city of the living God. This God's not an idol. This God's not just something that's static. He's the living God. He moves and he breathes, and in him we have our being. But you see, we have come to thousands and thousands, and one translation says, and myriads and myriads. I don't even know what a myriad is, but it sounds like a lot of angels. We have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly to the church of the firstborn. You see, that's church. Thousands and thousands of angels that are joyous and coming to meet God. And I think about myself and I think how small and insignificant I am compared to the magnitude of God who fills the universe. You see, we've come to that, to the church of the firstborn. The firstborn from the resurrection. You know, when Jesus rose again, he was the firstborn of a new creation. A new creation. With a heavenly body that can walk through walls. That'd be cool. I know that Paul talks about getting a heavenly body in 1 Corinthians and how it's going to be different than the one we have, but the thing is that we're going to need it because the glory of God is so, I'm running out of adjectives. It's so, we use the word awesome so much that it just doesn't mean anything anymore. It doesn't mean anything anymore. You see, and then he says, the church of the firstborn whose names are written in heaven. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking that our names are written in heaven, and that our names are written in heaven. But you see, we've got to realize that we don't have anything to be proud of. We didn't do anything to get there. We didn't do anything to deserve it. I didn't go out and be good enough to be part of the church of the firstborn. But you see, it's names who is written in heaven. And he says, you have come to God, the judge of all men. You know, when you go and you stand before the judge, this is the one that has the final say. This is the one that has... Charles Finney, he preached a sermon once called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And he talks about how God has everybody in their hand and he's holding them over the pit of hell. And it's only by his word. It's only by his word and his will and his mercy that he holds us. You see, we have spent so much time hearing people saying, you're so great and you're so wonderful. But we forget how great he is. We forget what magnitude he is. And he's the judge of all men. And we're going to the spirits of righteous men made perfect. Righteous men made perfect. The only way they're made perfect is by the blood of the Lamb. By the blood of what he did, that's the only thing that makes us perfect. And so we've got to start changing our perspective when we come into experience God. We need to change our perspective, I think, because this is what was being impressed upon me the last 2 days. That we need to change how we look at God. Yes, he's a loving Father, and yes, he loves everybody, but he loves the people that end up in hell too. You see, I think that the church is sugar-coated so much that people don't fear God anymore. Paul says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. We've heard too much of the just ministry. Just say this prayer and just come down here and just say these few words. And then you can go live your life the way you want. What a lie. But you see, it says here that Jesus is our mediator of this new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. You see, his sprinkled blood is speaking over us. His sprinkled blood is speaking life over us. It's his blood. It's not ours. We didn't bleed for this. Just recently, D-Day was celebrated when the Allied troops hit Normandy, France. And 80% of those soldiers bled and died on that beach, on Omaha Beach. What'd they bleed and die for? They bled and died for freedom. Well, guess what? Jesus bled and died for our freedom. He bled and died for our freedom. He bled and died for our righteousness, for our invitation. You know, when your name's written in the heavens, when your name's written in the book of life, that's your invitation. That's your invitation to the wedding supper of the Lamb. That's your invitation to sit in the glory of God in the New Jerusalem. And so he says here, see to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. We can't refuse him. I mean, look what he's done. Look what he's prepared. Look. We've got to change. We've got to change the way our hearts feel about this. We've got to change the way we look at this. Because they refused him. Those that went to that mountain refused him. And you know what happened? He shook the earth. He shook the earth. But you see, he said, if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven, how much less will we be? And at that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised once more, I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. You see, he has that kind of power. He has that kind of power that he can shake the heavens. You know, all these scientists think all these things are just, so rock solid and steady anywhere they are. But God has the ability to shake the heavens. And he says, at that time the voice that shook the earth, now he promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken. So you see, he's going to shake things. He's going to shake things up. He's going to shake our lives up so that all the things that can be removed will be. All the things that are not rock solid in us will be taken away. All the things that are not rock solid in us, and that includes our faith. That includes what we stand on. That includes, our religion, if you will. Because he has an unshakable kingdom. He has a kingdom that will not be shaken, nothing will fall off of it. Nothing will fall from it. But there's so many people that are building their own kingdoms everywhere. There's so many pastors that are building their own kingdoms that they don't realize that they're taking people that are going to be shaken. They're taking people that are going to be shaken. You see, we have to become unshakable. We have to become unshakable. And the only way we can become unshakable is to hold on to not just the hem of his garment. I'm going to wrap my arms around his feet and never let go. You know, like I was saying, when I get to heaven, I'm just going to wrap my arm around his feet and I'm not letting go of this. But you see, we have so many things in our life that are just shakeable. We have so many things in our lives that if God shook our lives, everything, it'd kind of be like, it's kind of like, the cartoon of the father who grabs his son and turns him upside down and shakes everything out of his pockets, It's going to be like that. But you see, if we are shakeable, that means we can break covenant with God. If we are shakeable, if the enemy can shake us, if the enemy can attempt us to go and break the covenant with God, then we're shakeable in front of God. And so as we come, we can't refuse these words because these words are so important. These words are so important. God's not only saying I love you. God's not only saying I bled for you. God's not only saying that I've written your name down. God's saying I want all of you. Jesus said, I gave it all and I expect it all. That was the trade. I give you my life for your life. If you go back to, remember the spies that Rahab housed at Jericho? You remember those people? Those two spies, they go to check out Jericho and they end up in a prostitute's house. I always laughed about that. But you see, she made a deal with them. She says, listen, I'm going to save you. I'm going to hide you from the army of Jericho, but you're going to make a deal with me. Your lives for our lives. It's the same deal Jesus made. My life for your life. My life for your life. I'm about to bleed for you. That's why he told his disciples, he said, listen, you have to pick up your cross and follow me. And he was saying that to a bunch of guys who knew that if somebody carried a cross outside the city, they knew one thing about that guy. He was not coming back. And he's telling us to do the same thing. He's telling us we have to die to ourselves. We have to die to our wants, our needs, our emotions, everything, because we're supposed to follow him. And if we follow him, you know what we're going to do? We're going to love everybody. We're going to pass his love on. We're going to pass his love everywhere. If we're following him, I had one guy say, I think Christians are too narrow-minded. And I said, I don't think they're narrow-minded enough. We're all looking everywhere, for all these different things when we realize we're not realizing that we're trying to attend the church of the firstborn. We're trying to attend the church of the firstborn who gave everything. And so, because he gave everything, it says that created things will be shaken, so that what cannot be shaken will remain. So that what cannot be shaken will remain. You see, that's why we need to be steadfast in what Jesus said, he who endures to the end is the one who gets saved. If we have to remain steadfast, we have to remain unshakable. You see, we have to have unshakable faith. We have to determine and decide stuff all the time in advance. We shouldn't be able to, always just make our decisions right on the spur of the moment. Because if we do that, we're going to be ruled by our circumstances. I remember once a man said, well, are you going to keep... He was a preacher. I can't remember who it was. Sorry, runny nose. Anyway, and he said, if your child was starving and you had no money, would you steal a loaf of bread to feed them? I'm not asking you to answer that out loud, but if you would feed them, then you don't trust God, because you broke his law to steal the bread when God said he had every living thing in his hand. You see, that makes you shakeable. That makes you shakeable, that you would compromise what you know God says is wrong to justify what you think is right. So then it says here that everything that cannot be shaken will remain. Then it says, therefore. So that therefore is because of everything I just read, okay? That therefore is there for because of that. And it says, since we are receiving a kingdom. We're receiving that kingdom, right? Why? Because our names are written in heaven. Because we're going to attend, the church of the firstborn. Right? And we're going to be in the New Jerusalem. We're going to be able to go into that temple that is made out of deity. Because of that, we're receiving that kingdom that cannot be shaken. Let us be thankful. Let us be thankful. And so, worship God acceptably. What's that mean? That means the worship is acceptable to God. That God calls it worship. That God calls it what he says in his book. We should worship him acceptably with reverence and awe. And you know what? We throw around that word awe so much. We throw it around, and I looked up synonyms in the Biblical Hub for awe. And in the lexicon it says to tremble, to fear, to dread, to be shattered, to be broken into many pieces. See, we're supposed to be before God, shattered, broken. See, we've lost awe. We've lost our awe before God. We've lost it. We've become so complacent. We think that worship is just singing songs and we might have a little bit of the presence of God come in, because some part of our heart may have worshipped him. But you see, the thing about it is that he wants us in awe of him. He wants us in awe of him. And if we're going to be in awe of him, that means we have to be broken before him. That means we have to be humble before him. And reverence, reverence says to quiver, to tremble, to let it flow from your gut. You see, all those things, God said right here, worship God with reverence and awe, to tremble, to fear, to be broken before him, to be humbled before him, that every bit of pride's got to go. Every bit of pride has got to leave. Pride is what got Lucifer kicked out of heaven. I mean, you think he's going to let it back in with us? No, he's not going to let it back in with us. And so I looked up a bunch of words, a bunch of scriptures, and I hardly ever do a topical sermon, but I look up a bunch of that are models of this reverence, models of this awe. And in Psalm 51, verse 17, it says, "The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, and a contrite heart. A broken spirit and a contrite heart. And it says, and oh God, you don't despise that. A broken and contrite heart. And then Isaiah 57. Verse 15 says, for this is what the high and lofty one says, he who lives forever, whose name is holy. I live in a high and holy place, but also with him who is contrite, broken, and lowly in spirit. I live with them. I live in a high and holy place, but I also live with him who's contrite and lowly in spirit, to revive that spirit and the heart of the contrite. You see, God wants to revive our heart. He wants us contrite, and so he can make us whole in his way. Not whole in our way, but whole in his way. And then in Isaiah 62, or 66, verse 2, it says, has not my hand made all things? That's showing the magnanimous of the, what's the word? The greatness of God. That's showing that my hand has made everything. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is a house you're going to build for me? You see, we think we can house God in this. We think we can house God in a building. And even Solomon knew that he couldn't have God in the great temple that Solomon built. But God's going, where are you going to build a house for me? Where's my resting place? Has not my hand made all things, so they come into being, declares the Lord. This is the one I esteem. God speaking. This is the one I esteem. All right? He who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Trembles at my word. You see, I don't think there's a lot of Christians that tremble at the word of God. I think we need to reevaluate our contrite hearts. We need to reevaluate our pride and our humility before God. And the last one, Psalm 119, verse 120. And it says, now this is David talking, my flesh trembles in fear of you. I stand in awe of your laws. My flesh trembles in fear of you, and I stand in awe of your laws. You see, as you go around and you see things, look, you can look at creation, you can say, that is awesome. You know, even though Kim was trapped in the mountains yesterday, she took some awesome pictures of creation. All right? Because God's creation is awesome. God is awesome. All right? But you see the last verse it says here, therefore, since we're receiving this kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. Our God is a consuming fire. And you see, we have to let that fire consume us. We have to let that fire consume our pride. We have to let that fire consume our humanness. We have to let that happen, you see. So we need to present ourselves before God. Broken, contrite. Broken and contrite. And you know, the thing about it is that it may take a while for this to happen. It may take a while for us to be broken before God because we've been so used to being complacent. We've been so used to being okay with everything. But we have to have a contrite heart and spirit. And so, I hope this has hit home. I hope this has hit home because it hit me. It hit me really hard. That worship has not been reverent and in awe of God when it needs to be. And so, what we're going to do today is, and I hate to say it this way, but we're going to practice. We're going to practice laying before God, broken, letting our pride melt away, letting our pride just seep into the floor, letting it go so that our heart is pure before God. All right? So that our heart is pure before God because it has to be. I want each and every one of us to have that name in heaven. I want each and every one of us to be a member of the church of the firstborn. So what I'm going to do is there's no words to songs today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just play my guitar with the chord series, and I'll change them here and there. And I'm going to ask you to get in the position of worship. And the Bible says the position of worship is on your face. And so we have this really nice rug here to worship God. And you have nice carpet there to worship God. And then about halfway through, Ben, if you wouldn't mind, could you play some chords while I do it? I really appreciate that. So, right now, Father, I just pray that your word would just be sealed in our hearts. That your Spirit would come and expose our hearts before you. That your Spirit would come and help us be broken before you. Help us learn what awe is. Help us take the first steps into worshiping you acceptably. In Jesus' name.